Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Let's be very clear about this. This was well organized. It was organized online. There was the goal of killing Nancy Pelosi. There was the goal of killing Mike Pence. Put that together, you have this mob that's focusing on decapitating the head of our constitutional government. The goal to kill the number 2 and the number 3 leaders, the number 2 and the 3 constitutional officers in the United States of America. And it was explicitly stated. We also found out this weekend, of course, that while Donald Trump was watching this, he was curious. He was confused, not that all hell was breaking loose at the center of American democracy, but that more people around him weren't as excited as he was at the chaos that was going on. As Ben Sass said, all reports from inside the White House, the senator said that Donald Trump was delighted and excited while he was watching the Capitol riot go on. And let's call this what this is, okay? I said a couple of weeks ago, we need to just start going by definitions. Okay. All right? Let's stop trying to figure out what Donald Trump is, what his idea. He's a fascist. I said that well before this happened. He encourages violence. And this is not new. You know, I'm not going to even say her name. It's a writer that I've known for some time and respected. But one writer said that Donald Trump's turned bad. That Donald Trump said he turned even darker. Well, you know, that would be kind of hard for Nancy Pelosi and other people whose lives have been threatened over the past 4 or 5 years to decide that Donald Trump's just turned bad. Or why don't we talk about what he said during the campaign when he kept talking about violence like a fascist leader does? Remember in August when he talked about Second Amendment solutions, that if we wanted to stop Hillary Clinton from getting elected and appointing Supreme Court justices, that Donald Trump said there were many in the crowd that could even engage in Second Amendment solutions. I wrote at the time in the Washington Post, 2016, that Donald Trump had once again crossed a bloody line, and this time there was no coming back from it, that the Republicans needed to drop him as their nominee for president before something tragic happened. But they continued letting him do this. After Charlottesville, talking about enemies of the people, praising a congressman for beating up a reporter who had just asked a question about health care, constantly glorifying violence. Who does this? Fascists do this, and they have throughout history. Mussolini, read Mussolini's biography. What did he do? He would go out, he would give speeches, and right at the top of of anything you read about Mussolini, he rose to power by inspiring people to go and attack and invade and to trash government buildings in Italy. And this was, we're going to show you a little bit of, in fact, I don't know if we have it right now. Do we have a little bit of Arnold Schwarzenegger?
This is very powerful.
Arnold Schwarzenegger, born in Austria 2 years after the end of World War II, talking about how he grew up with broken men who believed Hitler's lies. And it was one lie stacked on top of another lie, stacked on top of another lie. And those men believed those lies. And they, and Austria, and Germany paid the ultimate price for it. Here's Governor Schwarzenegger.
Now, I grew up in Austria. I'm very aware of Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass. It was a night of rampage against the Jews carried out in 1938 at the Nazi equivalent of the Proud Boys. Wednesday was the day of broken glass right here in the United States. So being from Europe, I've seen firsthand how things can spin out of control. I know there is a fear in this country and all over the world that something like this could happen right here. Now, I do not believe it is, but I do believe that we must be aware of the dire consequences of selfishness and cynicism. Our democracy has been tempered by wars, injustices, and insurrections. I believe, as shaken as we are by the events of recent days, we will come out stronger because we now understand what can be lost.
We do understand that, but as Governor Schwarzenegger said, we now know, as we always have known, who Donald Trump is. He has revealed himself, and he will be driven from the public square. He will lose relevance. He will be chased by prosecutors for the rest of his life.
So far, the tech community and the golf community has chased him away. We'll see what the actual justice of our country does.
But the question is, what about Kevin McCarthy, a guy who actually inspired these traitors with his seditious words? What about Jim Jordan, who's getting the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Donald Trump, forever debasing that? Ask people who actually wrestled with him as a coach when he was in college whether he deserves anything.
It is Monday, the 11th of January of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. This is the day we hash it out from all that's been left over from the weekend. And oh, there's so much that comes out of the weekend now. Much more than we can consume in those, 3 to 2 short days. It's a long weekend, no matter what kind of weekend it is. Now that, as Trump has been president, those so many years. But, days. We're within days now of this guy. Supposed to leave office. Whether he will of his own accord remains to be seen. By all evidence and clues and, outright statements, it looks like there's still an insurrection going on. The opponents, the opposing forces are, mustering their forces for another, I guess they're going to attack again. They didn't get what they wanted, and now lots of them can't fly on a jet. And they're crying, I'm on a terrorist watch list. I'm not a terrorist. Yes, you are. You tried to overturn an election, all right? You stormed the halls of Congress. Oh, you were only outside? Too bad. Anyway, it's quite easy to ping a cell phone to find out where you were, and I'm sure many are being investigated as such. Yeah. Might want to, get a burner phone. Yeah. Anyway, these people were taking selfies. They were giving, a chronological report to the cops of all their movements and what their intents were anyway. Because I got to tell you, Erecting a gallows and chanting, "Hang Mike Pence," I think the intent's rather clear. All right? There's no mystery about it. So all of those Republicans out there are saying, oh, they weren't really insurrectionists. Stop calling them fascists. You're dividing the country. Wait a second. You guys voted after cops had been killed, after some insurgents had been killed. You went in there and voted to make Trump a dictator. 168 of you out of 203 voted to make Trump a dictator after a failed coup attempt. And it's not actually, I don't know if it's failed yet because the coup is ongoing. These aren't cells of terrorists, by the way. One might say that the whole of the Republican Party is now ISIS, the American Taliban. They seem to be doing all that they accused Antifa of doing, whoever Antifa is. I still haven't figured that out. An anti-fascist? What's wrong with that? Yep. Or they're trying to blame Antifa. Matt Gaetz is still on the floor saying it's Antifa. Well, you're going to get kicked out of the government as well. And hopefully you'll be going to jail, aiding and abetting. You know, we talk about Hawley and Cruz, and I think Marco Rubio's getting up there too. But let's not forget about Gaetz. Kristallnacht and the Night of the Long Knives combined in that D.C. insurrection. There was a gambit to be played, and it didn't play out exactly the way he wanted. Now, we can surmise, and I think rightfully so, that the gambit was to call in the National Guard, declare martial law, overturn the election. Didn't quite get that far. But he had a lot of inside help, and so did the insurgents. You know, out here in Oregon, we have security camera footage of a right-wing secessionist Republican elected in our Oregon State House, who during a special session that was closed to the public, now the press was there, but we're in a pandemic. The session was closed to the public only in such that they couldn't come into the building. They could watch it on live feed. That wasn't good enough for the right-wing secessionists who want to, if not recall Kate Brown, well, you know, drag her from the State House and hang her. So this footage shows this right-wing Republican secessionist, and he is. He wants to cede this state and form another state, which surprisingly was funded by the Russians, that effort. But yeah, that's a whole other story that they would like to forget, but we won't let them, will we? Anyway, he opens up the door for these terrorists to enter the State House and wreak mayhem. Immediately after he had opened these doors and these insurgents themselves began streaming in, the state police tried to stop them. They formed a cordon. But this guy is under investigation for a criminal act. We have a QAnon bimbo bar owner. And I'm not talking about she being a bimbo. I'm saying a bimbo bar in Colorado who posted a video of her carrying her Glock. And she's not going to let any black people in D.C. tell her what to do. And when I say black people, I mean people in elected office. Cops in D.C. have no power over her. She is the voice of her constituents, she says. And nobody's going to stop her from carrying her Glock. And she's going to carry that Glock into the well of Congress, into the seat of Congress. And no one will stop her. So this Babbitt from Colorado, Babbitt, I like the Sarah Palin glasses too. They're supposed to, I don't know, add some sort of gravitas. We'll see. The four spiked heels are a good touch too. Yeah, you know, everyday people. So she was giving her speech about the fraud of the election and how Joe Biden is a Chinese baby pedophile eating babies, drinking their blood in the basement of Comet Pizza. I mean, she's going off. And in her speech, she stipulated in the congressional record that she is the voice of those people out there that were banging on the doors of the Senate. I'm sorry, banging on the doors of Congress. Well, I should say that both the Senate and the Congress were together because they're validating an election, and she was lodging her protest to question, to overturn a legal election. There's nobody stealing this election. If there was any electoral anomalies, why don't we look at 2016? But no, we had to live with that. Everybody and their mother knows that Donald Trump got installed with help from Vlad. And there was nothing that we were going to do about it. He won. It was stupid. He didn't win the popular vote. He won the Electoral College, but he won. Got to live with it. That's the way the cookie crumbles, even though we got outside help. We warned everybody it was happening, and they let it happen because, well, they're craven opportunists. And then in the midst of all this, Mitch McConnell obstructed absolutely everything like he did for the 8 years of Obama's presidency. Everything. Even election security. And what are they whining now about the steal the vote campaign? Is that we didn't have election security and it was the Democrats' fault. Really? In spite of the fact that we didn't get a bill passed, we still had the apparatus of government to be able to ensure a fair and legal election, especially since we knew what happened in 2016. So what Trump has been whining about this whole time is that he cheated and we were able to win in spite of the cheating. You know, it happens in sports all the time, you know, all the time. And Trump and his crew cannot believe it. They've been whipped into a frenzy. They are cultists or cultic. It's not hyperbole to say that they've been brainwashed. And so this elected, who said that she is the voice of those people banging on the doors, turns out she was their eyes and ears too, because she was tweeting to them, communicating with them where Nancy Pelosi was going. And minutes later, that seat of Congress, that seat of government was invaded by these insurgents. And that's when a woman got shot, who apparently now is a martyr for the cause, but no one is mourning, really, Sicknick's death, Officer Sicknick. You know, he voted for Trump. I hear the right wing saying, oh, it's a terrible fact that they won't acknowledge, meaning us. Yeah, we acknowledge it. We're against Trump supporters bashing in the head of other Trump supporters. What the hell are you talking about? And where's the Blue Lives Matter people? You know, now that Trump's been shamed into it, if that's possible, shaming Trump, well, he's going to actually now fly the flag and half-mast for Officer Sicknick. But it won't be for Officer Sicknick. It's for the other people that died, too. Yeah, Melania is like out there whining that, this is about me. It's not about the people that died, even though she did. Now, I got to hand it to Maggie Haberman. I mean, Maggie did note that she did mourn the dead from that incident first. Yeah, the first one is that so-called martyr, the lady who got shot in the neck trying to crawl through a window when she was told that we will fire if you do that. Officer Sicknick and the other officer who died are way down on the list. The other officer who died of a heart attack. Still haven't heard about the one who committed suicide. What was the cause of that? I'll be interested to know. I know a lot of people said it was PTSD. Yeah, well, I also think that since there's a lot of inside help with right-wing white supremacists and law enforcement, there's going to be a lot of scrubbing to do, and I think this person didn't want to get scrubbed. He'd scrub himself. And they did. But that remains to be seen. It's just a suspicion. So we have inside help from newly elected QAnon gun-toting nuts giving operational info during an insurrection for insurgents to find Nancy Pelosi and Vice President Mike Pence, and they had built a gallows. And they were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." And we have people sitting in Nancy Pelosi's office with their feet up on the desk saying we're going to put a bullet in her noggin on live TV. And somehow, the person who incited that, the person who for years elevated the frenzy to a fever pitch, and the fever broke on January 6th. To hold that person to account is being divisive. Not the crime of insurrection. Let's not mention that. Holding people to account for the crime of insurrection is being divisive, and that's how they work every single effing time. And Marco Rubio, you are a Vichy collaborator, and you are aiding and abetting an insurrection along with Jim Jordan, Matt Gaetz. I guess Mitch McConnell saw the error of his ways because his life was threatened in the same fashion, and they all had to go. And they all sat in a skiff. And the Republicans would not put on a mask. And now everybody's got to be tested because the Republicans have a epidemic it's a pandemic, but within the confines of the Congress, it's somewhat like an epidemic. They won't follow health rules, and now they're infecting others, and they just sat in there and laughed when masks were being handed out in a closed room while insurgents were storming the Capitol, while Donald Trump was misdialing and calling up Mike Lee instead of Coach Tuberville. Yeah, let's call the new guy. Let's get him to make sure that we overturn this election and I get to be dictator. And it's Democrats who are divisive. Give me an effing break. Well, what's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on this River City Ash Mondays? Of course, the day will be taken up a lot with, the January 6th insurrection, because that's still resonating. I'm still kind of angry about it. And starting off, that was Joe and Micah breaking it down about how, there are disturbing new details about the Capitol riots that have emerged. The initial footage seemed like a circus atmosphere when you see what actually went on. That wasn't fun and games. They were looking for people to kill, and they would have. And you know what? They did. On the rest of the menu, a watershed overhaul of U.S. money laundering laws has cracked down on shell companies, and good. Let's put some light on that dark money. Off-duty police and firefighters are under investigation in connection with the D.C. Capitol insurgency. My suggestion, if there are any law enforcement or military or firefighters, current or former, who took part in the insurrection who have posted advocacy of the insurrection, I would suggest turn yourselves in. It'll go a lot easier on you, a lot. And the White House pushed the top federal prosecutor in Atlanta to resign because he wasn't doing enough to break the law for Trump. Yeah, this insurgency didn't come out of a vacuum, all right? Let's be clear. And we know who to blame. And blaming him is not dividing the country. I'm tired of hearing, oh, you're trying to just scrub 71 million votes. Well, you know what? 84 million voters say to shut the F up. After the break, we move to the chef's table where the right-wing Austrian labor minister has quit over plagiarism allegations. Wow, that's almost like a virus going around too, isn't it? And security has been stepped up at Germany's Bundestag after the storming of the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C. Yeah, you better inoculate against that virus, and Germany is. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page, near the bottom there, is our chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. You know, we pay our bills, and because we pay our bills, we sometimes and somehow fly under the radar, which is a good thing, because in resistance radio, you got to do that, because there's some Nazi radar out there that's pretty strong, and we're able to avoid it. And paying your bills is, well, paramount to that effort. And we're able to do that because of your generosity. If you could afford an espresso type coffee drink, remember when you could do that without being in peril? Well, if you could afford to do so, send those funds our way once a month. We stretch those espresso dollars and pay our bills and get the needed machinery that one needs to be able to continue this resistance effort. And I was so hoping we wouldn't have to be resistance radio after January 20th, but apparently looks like the Reichstag fire didn't get the results they wanted, and it looks like the Kristallnacht Night of the Long Knives is might still be going on, but I don't know if it's going to work. But they're going to keep trying, and we need to resist that effort. We need to shine light on it. All right? And it is our civic duty to do so, and we take that very seriously. And we are so thankful that your generosity allows us to fulfill our civic duty. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, of course. I say that every day that we have the show, but I want to because I like to. Thank you, Tom. I take care of me, and, because that's all that's left. Regardless, follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms. Not Parler. No, would never go there. Yuck. And if you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., 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 etc. All right. One correction. I think I said 168 Republican Congress critters voted to make Trump dictator. Actually, that was 68%. 130 something. I think 134. Hold on just a second. Let me bring up that number again if I got it here. 138 of 202. Pencils out to 68%. So I apologize. It's still bad. All right. After an insurrection, after insurgents had been killed, after cops had been killed, they went in there and said, you know what? We're just going to finish the job of the rioters. You know, they did a good job, but they're not good enough, apparently. I'm still trying to figure out how they were able to locate Clyburn's, well, quote, secret office, the one that really isn't publicized anywhere. They went directly to that. They bypassed his main office, went to the sort of secret one. How'd they know that? What kind of intelligence efforts were being taken beforehand, and who had that information? Also, were there any little green men from Russia in that group of insurgents roaming the halls of Congress? The mind reels trying to figure that one out. Anyway, let's get involved with this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And it comes out of the Associated Press by Joshua Goodman. For years, a federal prosecutor in New York, Daniel R. Alonzo, led teams that had to search through a maze of anonymously owned corporate entities to expose criminal activity. It required all kinds of shoe leather investigating to identify who was really behind these shell companies, recalled Alonzo. You'd have to subpoena bank records and lawyers, as well as human sources, and even then, you frequently hit a dead end. Now, thanks to a watershed overhaul of U.S. money laundering laws, locating the proceeds from foreign bribery, drug trafficking, and financing for terrorists could be as easy as a few keystrokes. The new legislation, quietly passed by Congress last month after a decade-long fight, and who was fighting against it? I'm looking at you, Mitch, and the GOP. Why would you fight against money laundering laws? Why? Well, it is the most sweeping bank reform of its kind since passage of the Patriot Act in the aftermath of the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. For the first time, shell companies will be required to provide the names of their owners or face stiff penalties and jail sentences. The information will be stored in a confidential database accessible to federal law enforcement and shared with banks who are often unwitting accomplices to international corruption, unless you're Deutsche Bank and you that's part of your business model. It's not an overstatement that this law is a game changer in some serious ways, said Alonzo, who is now in private practice advising clients on foreign corruption and anti-money laundering issues. The Corporate Transparency Act was tucked into a defense spending bill, first vetoed by Trump and then overridden by Congress on New Year's Day. They had to hide it because he would have vetoed the bill just because of that. It was introduced by Representative Carolyn Maloney, a New York Democrat. Shouldn't she be a New York Democratic Party member? I think that's how it should be. Oh, well. And she had introduced that in 2010. And early on faced opposition from banks and business groups worried about red tape, as well as states as Delaware and Wyoming, which reap important revenues from the registration every year in the U.S. of nearly 2 million corporations and LLCs. But a string of international financial scandals involving soccer's governing body FIFA and the 1MDB Development Bank from Malaysia, as well as the leaking of the so-called Panama Papers, eventually softened criticism by revealing the prominent role played by secretive shell companies in hiding the proceeds from illicit activity. The U.S. financial system, the world's largest and most stable, really? Aren't we being propped up by the Fed in sort of like an illegal way so that Trump doesn't look bad? It's not working. It has long been a magnet for dirty money. Yeah, that's us. But the tools to prevent abuse by bad actors haven't kept pace with technology and a proliferation of instant online transactions across borders. The new law seeks to strengthen controls by creating a registry managed by the Treasury Department that will contain the names of the true owners of both domestically created shell companies as well as foreign ones conducting business in the U.S. Creating a shell company in states like Delaware requires little more than a payment of a $90 fee and a one-page letter listing the entity's name, a P.O. box, and a registered agent who is frequently a law firm dedicated to churning out companies in bulk. The true owners are rarely listed, their identities hidden under a web of subsidiaries. But once created, the entities can be used to purchase legitimate assets, such as real estate, using ill-gotten funds furtively transferred into a U.S. bank account. You mean they're laundering the money. While it may take some time for the law's impact to be felt, experts believe it will drive away from the U.S. some of the dirty money from abroad that has driven up real estate prices in major cities like New York, Miami, and Los Angeles. Oh, you mean properties where Trump is selling it to the Russians to launder Russian money. You mean like that. But nobody expects crime and corruption to stop. One weakness of the law, says former Treasury investigator Weber, is that it will push crimes further into the darkness, away from the U.S. to less reputable jurisdictions where secrecy remains. In many ways, the investigator said, this is like a multi-million-dollar game of whack-a-mole. Maria Caspani of Reuters brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. As investigators seek to identify rioters who stormed the U.S. Capitol, police departments in Virginia and Washington State have placed officers on leave as authorities examine whether they took part in unlawful acts while off duty. Fire departments in Florida and New York City have also said they reported to federal authorities allegations that some of their members may have been present when the mob broke into the Capitol as Congress met to certify the results of the November 3rd presidential election. The police departments in the small town of Rocky Mount, Virginia, said yesterday, Sunday, it had placed 2 officers on administrative leave after it learned they attended an event in Washington, D.C., while off duty. An event on Wednesday, by the way, January 6th. The town of Rocky Mount fully supports all lawful expressions of freedom of speech and assembly by its employees, but does not condone the unlawful acts that occurred that day, the department said in a statement, saying it had notified federal authorities. Now, 5 people lost their lives, including a Capitol Hill police officer, when supporters of Trump stormed the Capitol in an attempt to disrupt the formal recognition of Trump's election loss to Democrat Joe Biden. Dozens of people have been criminally charged, and the FBI has sought help from the public to identify more participants. Seattle's police department said it also placed 2 officers on administrative leave while an investigation takes place into any role they may have played in the chaos that unfolded on the other side of the country. If any Seattle police officers were directly involved in the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol, I will immediately terminate them, the department's interim chief, Adrian Diaz, said in a statement. The New York City Fire Department said it provided information to the FBI after receiving anonymous allegations that some of its members, active or retired, were present during the rioting in the nation's capital. And in Florida, the Sanford Fire Department said it placed one of its firefighters on administrative leave and was investigating after a photo and video emerged online that appeared to show him among the mob. On Saturday, a top Democratic lawmaker said the Capitol was a crime scene and urged mobile carriers and social media companies to preserve all data related to the carnage. Anonymous Reuters staff bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The White House pushed the top federal prosecutor in Atlanta to resign before Georgia's U.S. Senate runoff because Trump was unhappy that he wasn't doing enough to investigate Trump's unfounded claims of election fraud. The Wall Street Journal reported reported on Saturday. The Justice Department on Tuesday tapped a new federal prosecutor to lead the Atlanta office one day after the Trump-appointed U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia, B.J. Pak, abruptly resigned. Pak's resignation drew attention because Trump appeared to refer to him in a recent phone call with Georgia's Secretary of State, in which the outgoing Republican president asked state officials to try to find enough votes to overturn the results of the November 3rd election he lost to Democratic Joe Biden. In a recording obtained by numerous media outlets, Trump appeared to complain during the call about Pak without naming him, saying there was a never-Trumper U.S. attorney in Georgia. This never-Trumper was appointed by Donald Trump, and all he said is that I got to follow the law. Well, that's not what Trump wants, of course. The Journal, citing people familiar with the matter, said that at the behest of the White House, a senior Justice Department official called and told Pak he needed to step down because he was not pursuing the voter fraud allegations to Trump's satisfaction, meaning make him up. The White House declined to comment because they haven't even commented on the insurrection that happened on Wednesday. Do you expect them to say anything about this? Well, that brings us to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Jason Goldman.
And they'll basically crush or pop the head off of any worker who tries to attack them.
If you're a honeybee, a hornet attack could be the last thing you ever experience. It's a gory, violent process, and honeybees have had to adapt to stay alive. You've probably heard of those murder hornets that recently turned up in North America. This is not a story about those. This research takes us east to meet their cousins. Wellesley College biologist Heather Matala went to Vietnam to understand how Asian honeybees defend themselves from the hornets there.
And in Vietnam, that's the giant hornet, Vespa.
Typically, when a hornet invades an Asian honeybee hive, hundreds of bees surround the intruder and create what's called a heat ball. With the hornet caught in the center, the heat goes up and the oxygen goes down. The bees literally cook and choke the hornet to death. But Vespa has figured out a way to avoid this trap.
Giant hornets will hunt honeybees on their own and grab them one by one. But what is really lethal to honeybees is when they flip into a multiple hornet attack strategy. And when they do this, they essentially want to kill all the adult defenders so that the colony is no longer protected.
But in the face of this deadly bum rush, Asian honeybees have resorted to the scatological.
And a lot of the beekeepers hadn't noticed them, or if they had, they didn't know what they were. But there was a handful of beekeepers who had seen these spots.
Those spots, it turned out, were poop. The hive's decision to dip into the dung pile didn't come lightly, though. The alternative to covering their house in was annihilation of the colony in the face of an overwhelming giant hornet invasion.
And then at a certain point, the workers in the colony decide it's a lost cause and they'll abandon ship and everyone will leave. And that leaves the entire colony undefended. So at that point, the hornets can successfully, without any interference, break into the nest and occupy it. And when they take over a nest, what they do is ferry the bee larvae inside back to their own hornet larvae so that they can eat them.
One beekeeper told Madela and her colleagues that he had seen the honeybees collecting bits of water buffalo dung. He thought that might explain the spots. He thought the bees might be using the dung to keep the hornets away.
We confirmed that bees actually forage on dung, which is a surprise in itself.
Honeybees generally keep their nests clean and tidy. They're good at keeping diseases and pathogens out, two things that could be hiding in animal poop.
And the thought of them collecting feces in the field and intentionally bringing it back home was pretty stunning.
Whenever they detected a giant hornet nearby, but not other smaller hornets, the honeybees began to arrange bits of mammal or bird dung near the entrances to their hives. And the hornets themselves were less likely to land on a nest adorned with poop. If they did bother to land, they spent 94% less time attempting to break in. The study was published in the December 9 issue of the journal PLOS One. The researchers say this is the first time honeybees have ever been documented collecting non-plant matter. And because the bees are selective in what kind of poop they collect, and use it in a very specific way, they say it actually qualifies as tool use, the first known instance in wild bees. It isn't clear why or how the poop shield works. But Madela suspects that there must be some chemical inside the poop, presumably derived from the plants that the animals originally ate, that either actively repels the hornets or camouflages the scent of the bees' nests. American bees don't do this. Asian honeybees are a different species than the Western honeybees in Europe and North America.
I just can't even totally capture how much fun it really was to do this work. I didn't have a lot of personal experience with Asian bees, and so meeting them was kind of like meeting the crazy cousin of the bees you know really well. These bees are a lot smaller, but they're very, very fast and very reactive. And that's because of the kind of hornet pressure that they've evolved under. They have evolved to fly quite quickly in zigzagging patterns as they're approaching their nest so that they're very hard to catch.
Western honeybees did not evolve alongside hornets, as did their Asian cousins, which makes them especially susceptible to hornet attacks in places where giant hornets become introduced. If Madela and her team can figure out how poop keeps hornets away, it might help North American beekeepers help their bees to survive, if the so-called murder hornets decide they like it here. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Jason Goldman.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day the Battle of the Running Bulls occurred at GM's Fisher Plant No. 2 in Flint, Michigan. It marked the turning point in the Great Flint sit-down strike. Company guards attempted to stop food deliveries to the strikers. When confronted, the guards cleared out and the food deliveries resumed. The guards, however, reported to the local police that strikers were holding them captive. The Flint police soon arrived, throwing tear gas into the picket lines and through plant windows. The sit-downers responded with plant fire hoses and slingshots loaded with door hinges. The police continued to launch tear gas at the picketers. Then the crowd pelted police with any debris they could find. It was at this point that the police began firing indiscriminately into the crowd, seriously wounding 16. Glenora Johnson of the Women's Auxiliary, speaking from the sound truck, called her women to action. She recollected in 1976, quote, that when I appealed to the women of Flint, I said, there are women down here, the mothers of children, and I beg you to come down here and stand with your husbands, your loved ones, your brothers, your sweethearts. Then I saw the first woman struggling, and I noticed when she started to break through and come down that a cop grabbed her coat, and she just kept coming. As soon as that happened, other women broke through, and the cops did not want to fire into the backs of women. When the women did that, the men came naturally, and that was the end of the battle. The Women's Auxiliary would continue to play a vital role throughout the strike.
Sit down, you keep your seat. Sit down and rest your feet. Sit down, you gotta think. Sit down, sit down.
For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States, where it is currently 40 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a temperature nearly the same as yesterday, which was around 50. How dare they? We need snow. We're not supposed to get that warm. Well, it will be mainly cloudy today with areas of dense fog, winds light and variable. Showers this evening, bringing in about, almost a quarter-inch of rain, becoming steady rain overnight. Potential for a heavy rainfall, I guess, if we're going to get a quarter-inch overnight. Lows around 43, winds light and variable, and then we're expecting about 1.5 inches tomorrow. And potential for heavy rainfall with 1.5 inches. That's potentially heavy. Winds highs around 51. Winds will be out of the east-southeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And confirmed coronavirus cases in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon now stand at 6,364, with 77 deceased, which are increases from last week, though not the actual increases because we're a little delayed over the weekend. We'll get those totals later on today, and we'll update you on the actual totals tomorrow. Pollen right outside the window here in Rogue River proper is rated at none. The air quality index for the region is good at 22 parts per million, and the daytime UV index has ticked up 1 notch to 2, which is still considered low because it's wintertime. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.26 inches. Visibility is down to 4 miles, and relative humidity is at 99%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 48 and cloudy. Paris is 41 and cloudy. Rome is 45 degrees and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 30 and cloudy. Kabul is 33 with smoke. Hong Kong is 46 degrees and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 38 degrees and just merely cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 71 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 45 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York, New York is a chilly 31 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Anonymous Reuters staff bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. Austria's labor minister, Christine Aschbacher, has resigned after allegations that she plagiarized some of her university work but denied any wrongdoing and said she was stepping down to protect her family. Well, that's a good one. I've never heard that before. Aschbacher, a member of the conservative Austrian People's Party, which leads the coalition government, allegedly copied at least 1/5 of her doctoral dissertation from other sources, as well as chunks of her diploma thesis, according to academic Stefan Weber, who specializes in detecting plagiarism. Aschbacher said she had written her dissertation and thesis to the best of her knowledge and belief. You either did it or you didn't. I don't know. The hostility, the political agitation, and the insults are unfortunately being unloaded not only on me, but also on my children, and with unbearable force, she was cited as saying. I cannot allow this to continue in order to protect my family. For this reason, I am resigning from office. Oh, you've been lying to your family about your doctorate too, huh? Chancellor Sebastian Kurz thanked Aschbacher for her work and said he accepted her decision. On Sunday, he named economic researcher Martin Kocher as the new minister. According to Weber, Aschbacher had taken at least 1/5 of her dissertation, titled Drafting a Leadership Style for Innovative Companies, from other sources without properly labeling the citations. Among other things, she had translated an article from Forbes magazine from English, repeating the original author's claim to say she herself had worked with hundreds of teens.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Even more anonymous Reuters staff bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Security has been stepped up at Germany's Bundestag, the lower house of parliament, after the storming of the Capitol in Washington by rioters last week. Bundestag President Wolfgang Schäuble has told lawmakers Berlin state police have arranged for a reinforcement of their forces around the Reichstag building, he said. A spokeswoman for the Bundestag confirmed that Schäuble had written to lawmakers about the current situation, but declined to give details of the content of the letter. Bild am Sonntag also reported that Schäuble had asked the Foreign Ministry for a report on the Washington violence and would clarify with the federal government and the state of Berlin what conclusions should be drawn for Bundestag security. In Berlin, protesters against coronavirus restrictions stormed the steps of the Parliament building during a demonstration in August, and some were waving the far-right Reichstag flag. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we're going to meet up tomorrow for Terrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. We'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.